Welcome back to SuperString. Today I will show you a sentiment, dream film from 2021, named The Map of Tiny Perfect Things. Spoilers ahead. Look out and fare thee well. It's a typical morning for everybody around, except not for secondary school understudy and craftsman Mark, who is trapped in a period circle. He's experienced this equivalent day so often that he has everything about. Each day, he watches his mother go to work, then he eats with his dad Daniel and his sister Emma, speculating each easily overlooked detail they will say, similar to a challenge to Emma's soccer match that he turns down, and knowing every one of the responses to the crossword Daniel is doing. That is the manner by which the remainder of his day goes too. He takes the roads on his bike and explores the town, knowing the exact thing every individual will do. Some of the time he even meddles, such as removing a telephone from a driver's hand to keep away from a mishap. Yet, for the most part he messes around with it, doing things like purchasing the lottery ticket with the triumphant numbers or driving a backhoe in and out of town. Mark doesn't go to class any longer, however consistently he makes a point to come by a specific corner to give headings to a young lady called Phoebe, who he really likes, yet he actually hasn't figured out how to push a legitimate discussion along with her. In the early evening, he goes to the neighborhood pool to keep a ball from hitting Phoebe on the head or safeguarding her before she falls, and now and again he figures out how to walk her home from that point forward, yet she never acknowledges his encouragement to hang out later. While he's inclination disappointed with everything going on, Mark visits his companion Henry, who is experiencing issues completing a videogame level. By professing to discuss what is happening, Mark inquires as to whether he got in a period circle, and Henry says he'd get the young lady on the grounds that having endless attempts implies he's need to do it right at some point or another. Henry likewise calls attention to that you'd need to escape the circle in light of the fact that the reiteration and the disengagement would negatively affect you, and Mark denies it, saying you'd be the ruler of the world. Truly, however, he has minutes where he feels desolate, particularly when he needs to try not to have a significant talk with his father. Mark continues going difficult with Phoebe at the pool consistently until one evening, Margaret steps in and gets the ball before it hits Phoebe. Stunned by having something other than what's expected occurring, Mark follows her on out, yet she moves in a vehicle and drives away before he can converse with her. In the ensuing circles, Mark starts searching for her, frantic to be aware if another person is left with him. He holds up by the pool, however she doesn't return there, and he additionally gives the number a shot, the missing canine flyer she dropped prior to leaving, yet entirely it's not hers. After many bombed attempts, Mark is visiting a cafe when he sees a manga volume and $100 greenback have heedlessly been left on a table. Getting it might have just been her, he surges outside, and subsequent to accepting briefly that he lost her in the transport, he really observes Margaret leaning against the divider. Not entirely settled, Mark gets some information about the time circle, and Margaret affirms she's additionally been caught in it. They talk clumsily about their experience, concurring that it seems like being the main individual's alert while every other person is sleeping. However, Margaret needs to leave, not keen on become a close acquaintance with Mark. Not having any desire to lose the main individual that comprehends, Mark persuades her to remain somewhat longer by showing her a few entertaining things he's found in and out of town, similar to a canine taking a man's telephone. At the point when Margaret gets a significant call, she genuinely needs to leave currently, yet Mark inspires her to share her number so they can regard each as other once more at a later time. Before the day resets at 12 a.m., Mark retains Margaret's number, which luckily he actually recollects after the circle kicks in. He starts evaluating various hairdos and sending her photos, however she doesn't answer until he really requests that she get together. Then, at that point, they start sharing somewhat more about one another. Mark should be in summer school, yet he's just gone 2 times. His fantasy is to go to workmanship school, yet his folks are fixated on placing him in respects math, and he wishes the circle wasn't occurring on the day Daniel needs to discuss his child's future. Margaret, then again, is in AP and fantasies about turning into a space traveler. They additionally share what insane things they've been doing during the circle. Mark has bounced a cargo train and ridden his bike through school. Margaret has placed her chess application on most extreme trouble, however she hasn't figured out how to beat it yet. She likewise took her companion's vehicle and has been training herself to drive. Her number one thing, however, is something in the woodland outside town, so she takes Mark there to show him. This exceptional second comprises of a bird flying down the lake and effectively getting a fish with its hooks, which Mark concurs is astonishing. In the wake of visiting for some time, Margaret drives Mark home and leaves when once more she gets a critical approach her telephone from a man called Jared. On the following reset, Mark takes Margaret to watch the skate rodents, albeit the majority of them suck at it. One specific skater figures out how to pull a stunt pleasantly, which Mark finds as fascinating as the bird. A short time later, the couple rides a steamroller through the roads, while Mark attempts to figure out who this Jared fellow is, however Margaret just lets him know he's a prescription understudy. Afterward, while having a silly measure of inexpensive food and frozen yogurt at a cafe, Mark admits that he thinks this is what's going on with living in the know. The vast majority of life is garbage, yet like this, they can find how astonishing life can be assuming they needed it to. This gives him a thought, perhaps they ought to track down every one of the little ideal things around and gather them. Margaret is incredulous on the grounds that she would rather not make the most of every opportunity as Mark does, she just needs to go through it, yet she gives in when he brings up they just have one another, and the circle ought to be significant. Their most memorable deed is to leave irregular dollar greenbacks around the store for individuals to find, while they examine a few speculations about the final aspect, which Margaret doesn't believe now is the right time, she believes they're the shadows of the final aspect individuals. She additionally shows Mark what a 4D 3D square would resemble by drawing it on the store's window. A while later, their circles are spent searching for cool kind of thing in and out of town. They acknowledge any second they observe special, similar to an old lady moving in the wake of dominating a card match, a man acquiring wings when a van stops behind him, and a janitor stopping his work to play the piano. Sometimes, Margaret additionally hauls Mark to the library to show him math. Regardless of anything else they do, however, Margaret generally leaves when she gets that call from Jared. In any event, when she concedes she doesn't believe the day should end and would prefer to have time broken for eternity. After an evening spent going ballistic his father with joke answers in regards to his future and showing him a tattoo, Mark awakens to still up in the air to figure out who this Jared fellow is. The web shows him an image of a staff part at the nearby clinic, which causes Mark to feel inconsequential. He chooses to visit Henry for guidance on the best way to handle these sentiments he's creating for Margaret, so Henry gives him a few thoughts. This ought to be done through a secrecy date, start with the typical hanging out, and progressively make it more heartfelt continuously until the ideal second for a kiss comes up. Also, this secrecy date ought to be something that shows Mark really grasped her. Bunches of arranging and paying off the children in the craftsmanship division later, Mark takes Margaret to his school exercise center, where he has set up a model of tranquility base for her. They go through the early evening time messing about, professing to be in space and eating Space Explorer food. They additionally ride a bike through the school halls together. A while later, they come by Mark's home, where he enlightens Margaret somewhat more concerning his loved ones. His mom works the entire day, so the disadvantage of the circle is that he hasn't seen her in a really long time since she leaves while he's awakening, and his father, as of late, left his place of employment to compose a book about the Civil War. Nonetheless, Margaret evades the subject of her own folks, so the couple winds up watching a film all things considered. Margaret takes the risk to check out his work area to appreciate his specialty, and that is the means by which she observes a guide he's drawn denoting every one of the ideal minutes they've found in and out of town. She's very dazzled, particularly when he concedes he makes it each day, while expecting to discover an example of some kind or another, yet up until this point he hasn't seen anything. Now that both of them are sitting intently and having a charming second over the guide, Mark attempts to kiss Margaret, however she pulls back and says she can't. Mark attempts to comprehend the reason why, figuring it could be Jared, and there's something Margaret isn't telling him, which makes her snap. She makes sense of that since they're remain together, they shouldn't successfully wreck it, so the ideal thing assortment ought to be sufficient. After a crushed Mark consents to simply be companions, Margaret passes on to take her typical call. The accompanying reset, Mark is feeling awful, so he doesn't do his typical expectations through breakfast. He really does anyway ask his father how his mother is doing, getting fine as a response. Thereafter, he strolls typically to Henry's so he can impart every one of his sentiments to a well-disposed ear, yet since Henry doesn't have the foggiest idea what's happening, it just baffles Mark more. Whenever he gets back later, Mark is cornered by Daniel attempting to have the discussion about his future. Not having the option to take it any longer, Mark at last snaps and shouts at his father, letting him know he has no future since time is broken, and that it is absurd that he isn't permitted to go to workmanship school when Daniel quit his place of employment to compose an emotional meltdown book. Then, at that point, Mark attempts to go to his room, yet he's irritated by Emma's violin practice, so he goes to her room rather to request that she stop. Subsequent to taking care of the violin, Emma takes the risk to ask him how the discussion went, not accepting what she hears when Mark answers that he detests that his father quit to follow his fantasies, yet he can't do likewise. Emma makes sense of that Daniel didn't stop. He was terminated, not on the grounds that he screwed up, they simply didn't require him any longer, so he will not just let it out in light of the fact that he's embarrassed. Their mom is frantic at Daniel for losing the employment, however she won't utter a word either in light of the fact that it's excessively mean, and Daniel wouldn't fret Mark going to craftsmanship school, it's simply that they can't manage the cost of it at the present time. As Emma would like to think, Mark would know everything assuming he would contemplate another person other than himself for a change. Feeling terrible for not focusing harder, Mark gets some information about her soccer match, in which they lost 3-0. On the following reset, Mark goes to see his algebra educator Mr. Pepper, who doesn't recollect him, since he just went to class 2 times. Mark asks him what might actually cause a period circle and offers a lot of speculations he found on the web, going from wormholes to mysterious condemnations. Mr. Pepper rejects them all aside from the hypothesis of peculiarity, which he concedes could be sensibly conceivable. Presently, Mark believes that the main thing he really wants to do to escape the circle is to receive in a plane and fly in return. The following time he meets with Margaret, they understand they've tracked down each ideal second around, yet time hasn't restarted. Mark is baffled, however she doesn't see the reason why, considering they're really free in a universe of zombies, yet this isn't working for Mark any longer. He needs the things he makes to endure longer than a day and experience having a vocation, so to occupy him from those considerations, Margaret takes him to a show house. The couple then continues to annihilate everything inside the house, which is loads of tomfoolery. However, Mark actually raises the subject of leaving the circle after they're finished. Margaret calls attention to that adulthood is simply stalling out in an exhausting daily schedule, so it isn't worth the effort when they can have no worries, yet Mark answers they really don't have time, since time is the stuff that when you spend it, you don't get it back. Hearing those words causes Margaret to evaluate Mark's arrangement, so the following morning, they get on a plane to Tokyo. Anyway, Margaret is anxious, and when Mark begins messing around with a rest cover, she takes the risk to get away. At the point when Mark understands she's gone, it's past the point of no return. The plane is as of now taking off, in spite of the fact that he gets a text from her with an expression of remorse. He chooses to spend the flight making some workmanship, and when the opportunity arrives to cross the international date line, he prepares himself to see what occurs. Once more, unfortunately, it doesn't work, and he awakens around the same time. At the point when he goes down the stairs to eat, he's acting in a lot more quiet manner, and that gets him a more pleasant response from his sister, which is new. Seeing how being more amiable gives him improved results, he gets some information about his book, which gets a cordial visit moving. Subsequently, Mark goes with his father to watch Emma's soccer match, and this time, they truly do figure out how to score. This moves Mark to go through the circle in an alternate, more charitable way. He gifts the triumphant lottery pass to an irregular lady, utilizes the earth mover to protect a feline from a tree, hits the dance floor with the old lady, applauds the music the janitor plays, and really goes to algebra class. This time he figures out how to intrigue Mr. Pepper thanks to all the mentoring he got from Margaret. He additionally invests better energy with Henry and Emma, and even joins the skaters to attempt to pull off a step stunt, yet he winds up falling and breaking his wrist. While in the medical clinic, in the wake of getting his wrist cast, Mark is astonished by seeing Margaret around. He chooses to follow her, lastly figures out what really has held Margaret back this time. Her mom Greta is passing on from disease. The following time the day resets, Mark awakens with tears in his eyes, and he runs outside to stop the vehicle and embrace his mother before she leaves for work. A short time later, he visits Henry, and keeping in mind that they play video games together, he fills him in regarding Margaret. Mark used to think this was a romantic tale, and he was the legend. However, this story has forever been Margaret's, who just believes time should remain frozen so her mother doesn't pass on. Discussing Margaret, she's meeting Greta at this moment. She concedes she continues to ponder a kid, and that's what that she wrecked, so Greta advises her that it's never past time to make things right. Afterward, she's losing at chess again while sitting on the spot that gives her the holy messenger wings from the ideal second, and that is the point at which she sees it, the missing canine simply strolling around the area. Margaret salvages him, yet doesn't take him to his proprietor since he'll be lost again the following day. She understands Mark was correct, all that they fix gets broken once more. All things considered, she chooses to visit Henry and show him how to beat the videogame. The person biting the dust again and again, yet in the long run finding the way to proceed with assists her with having a revelation. Passing is horrendous, yet on the off chance that you don't confront it, then you wind up losing yourself as well. A guide shows up on the television screen, and that likewise gives Margaret a thought. She recalls Mark saying the ideal minutes could make an example that he didn't find, so she gets a guide of the town and starts discounting every one of the little things to track down the example herself. In the wake of returning to every one of the minutes and taking a gander at the guide for quite a long time, she thinks something is missing, and that is time. Utilizing string, she makes a 3-layered model of the settings of the ideal minutes, the shadow of which frames a 4D solid shape. It's feeling the loss of a vertex, however, so she makes a few computations and figures out the last second will be at 7 p.m. at the pool. During the following circle, Margaret visits Greta to communicate her feelings of dread toward losing her. However, Greta guarantees her she'll be fine and that she can do this assuming she permits herself to partake in life's ideal minutes in general. Thereafter, Margaret goes to the pool a couple of moments before 7 and tracks down Mark there. She educates him concerning the example. However, Mark admits he is familiar with Greta, so he would rather not leave the circle any longer since he can't do that to her. Moved by his words, Margaret shares somewhat confidential. The night prior to the circle started, she was informed Greta didn't have a lot of time left, so she only wanted for time to stop. Obviously, a person or thing out there paid attention to her and conceded her the desire. Then, at that point, Mark appeared, and she didn't have the foggiest idea about why, yet presently she knows. Along these lines, when now is the right time to go, she doesn't need to go alone. Margaret concedes she was off base, and they were the ones resting, while every other person lived, so now is the right time to awaken. Subsequent to proclaiming this is the last wonderful second, Margaret kisses Mark. Thereafter, Margaret goes to the clinic to say her last farewell to Greta. She leaves the structure clasping hands with Mark, and together they trust that the clock will hit 12 a.m. Whenever it abruptly begins coming down, they affirm they've at last escaped the circle. The following morning, they find the missing canine and return him to his proprietor together.